We'll begin here with the good morning exercise. We have the lifter here ready to perform his repetitions. To perform the repetitions, we first start off here with our feet shoulder width or slightly wider. We have our knees slightly bent hips. We have an overhand or pronated grip on the bar with our hands slightly wider than shoulder width here, and the bar resting at the base of the neck or just above the rear or posterior deltoids. We also have our chest out and our head or our face facing up, and we will keep it that way throughout the exercise. On the down phase or the eccentric phase, we want to take a deep breath here while slowly lowering the bar, controlling the bar, having our butt go straight out, our back become parallel or as close to parallel with the floor, and we want to pop back up. So the down phase we want to control, the up phase we want to explode here and be powerful with our movements. The eccentric phase or the lowering phase, the down phase here, we do work our hip flexors here, quad muscles, hip muscles, of course our abs. On the up phase, we get hamstrings, specifically the biceps femoris, the semimembranosus, and the semitendinosus. Some other muscles include the erector spinae, among other spinal muscles. We see the lifter here does a great job of pushing the butt back and lowering the weight in a controlled manner, although we would like to probably see them get a little more parallel to the ground with their back as we see it from the side. Right there. He does keep his knees bent, his hips bent, his head facing forward, and the bar on the shelf the whole time. Some coaching cues here that sort of feel like you're beating a dead horse on most of these is to tighten up or keep that core tight throughout this lift, especially hinging at the hips here on the down phase and getting the back parallel with the floor before exploding up. Some other things to think about would be an athlete. That's an easy one to get an athlete to, have good posture. We want to have good posture, not just in regular everyday living, but throughout our lifts, of course. Some other coaching cues that could be specific to this lift would maybe to, control yourself, control that weight on the way down. Another one I like to use is explode, as we want to throw our hips forward. And throwing your hips forward could be another coaching cue specifically for this good morning exercise. To conclude, we want to have our feet shoulder width or slightly wider. We have an overhand or pronated grip with our hands on the bar, rested at the base of the neck or just above the posterior redelts. We have our knees slightly bent, we have our hips slightly bent, and we want to keep our chest out. Now we want to perform this all the way through the lift. Again, on the eccentric phase, while we're breathing in, keeping our abs tight and lowering ourselves with our quad muscles and our hip muscles, and then exploding up with our hamstrings and our back muscles while we breathe out. Some common sources of error with this lift be not keeping your chest out and kind of rounding out your back here. Maybe bending your knees too much as you come down, because this is not a squat. Another source of error would be too wide of hands. Of course, not having your feet in the right position, too narrow or too wide. Things of that nature. We'll begin here with the back squat. We see the lifter is here in the squat rack, ready to perform the repetitions. From the side view, you cannot really tell, but once we get to the rear view, we will see that we are in a low bar position. We have our hands in a pronated grip, wider than shoulder width. Our feet are also shoulder width or slightly wider. We want to have good posture on this lift as well, with our chest out. We want to keep a neutral back, or as much as possible throughout the lift, both down phase or eccentric, and the up phase or concentric phase. We also want our head slightly tilted up, looking forward and slightly above, especially on the down phase and the up phase. We want to do our best to control our movement here eccentrically on the down phase, and of course do our best to explode up here on the up phase or the concentric phase. Breathing technique should include breathing in eccentrically and breathing out concentrically on the lift. We see the lifter slowly controls the weight down and will explode up. One thing we see here from the side is the lifter's thighs don't get parallel to the floor, as he does not get deep enough. Although this may be a mobility issue or flexibility issue, in novice lifters this should improve with further weight training. He does do a good job keeping his back neutral throughout the lift and his chest out, also looking up as what we talked about earlier. We see here from the rear view, we have a low bar. We are controlling the weight down and exploding up. Our major muscles here are going to be in our quads and our glutes, which include the gluteus maximus and the gluteus medius. On the quad side of things, we will include the vastus lateralis, the vastus medialis, and the vastus intermedius, as well as the rectus femoris. Some coaching cues definitely include keeping a tight core, so to tighten up as we explode through the concentric phase, and of course lowering ourselves eccentrically. We also do not want our knees to bend in, so insteps off can be a good coaching cue to remember to keep our weight on our heels and the outer parts of our feet. Some common sources of error within this lift would be, as we see here, the lifter doesn't get as deep as we'd like. Some other things would include feet placement, maybe being too narrow here. Maybe allowing ourselves to hinge too far forward with our back and not keeping it neutral, as well as not keeping a tight core. In conclusion, when we have a low bar set here, we want our hands wider than shoulder width, pronated grip of course. We want our chest out. We want our feet shoulder width or slightly wider. Our toes pointed out as well. We want to control ourselves on the down phase here, breathing in and exploding up, breathing out. This lift uses the gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, as well as the quad muscles that include vastus lateralis, rectus femoris, vastus intermedius, and the vastus medialis. Next, we will cover the deadlift. Here we have the lifter with their feet shoulder width apart here. We have our hands in an alternated grip instead of just pronated, just outside the knees here and just outside the shoulders. Notice we do have the bar at our shins, right above our shoelaces, bent down, ready to lift the bar up. For the deadlift, we definitely want to keep a neutral back. We want to keep our chest out. We want our head straight in line with our spine. We also want to be looking out in front of us or slightly above. We want to keep our heels contacted with the floor. And we also want to keep our elbows extended. We do want to keep our elbows extended here because while we are holding the bar with our arms, we want to be pushing the weight through our feet, extending our hips and extending our knees. On the up phase here, as I mentioned, we will extend the knees and extend the hips into a standing position. We want to keep the bar as close to the shins and the body as possible, keeping our weight shifted back until we pass the knees, at which point we can come forward on the ball of our foot and fire through with the weight all the way at the up phase position. From the starting position, we will want to have taken a breath here because we want to exhale on this concentric phase before breathing in eccentrically on the way down. Major muscles involved with this lift would be the gluteus maximus, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, vastus lateralis, intermedius, and medialis, as well as the rectus femoris. We see the lifter pull the weight close to the shins, keeping a neutral back and popping up here. This is a pretty good side view as well. We see a neutral back. We have our alternated grip. We have our arms just outside of our knees and our hands just outside of our shoulders here. Fully extended elbows with our head facing forward and slightly up here. The lifter could probably do a better job of keeping the bar closer to the shins there, as we see from the side, and be more consistent in his lifts here, as every rep should be the same or close to the same. Some coaching cues here could definitely be tighten up. You want to keep your core tight for this lift. Be an athlete is definitely another one. We want to keep good posture here throughout the lift. Breathe is definitely another good one. We want them breathing throughout this lift with such a lift as this one. And we also want to explode through this lift. And we want to also mind our movers here. We want to imagine pushing through our feet, extending our knees, extending our hips to get this weight lifted off the floor. To conclude here, we want to have our feet shoulder width apart here. We want the bar close to our shins as possible. We want our hands slightly wider than our shoulders. We want a good neutral back. We want our chest out. We want our head looking straight ahead. When we do lift the weight, we want to keep it close to the body, keep our weight back, passing the knee and bringing our weight forward to explode the weight through, keeping our elbows extended, working those quad muscles and our glutes. Next, we will cover the Romanian deadlift, also known as the RDL. Here we have the lifter in a starting position. We have the hands in a closed pronated grip in the clean style. We have our feet shoulder width, maybe a little bit wider. And we also have our knees slightly flexed. The muscles we will be using in this exercise include the gluteus maximus, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, and the erector spinae. The down phase here that we will cover, we will be flexing at the hips, keeping our knees slightly bent the whole time, lowered to the patellar tendon, keeping our chest out, a neutral back, our head facing forward or slightly above, arms extended, and coming back up. Of course, we want to think about breathing here. We want to breathe in on the way down, or the eccentric phase, and breathe out on the concentric phase or the up phase. Lifter here does a great job of hinging at the hips here to lower the bar down to the patellar tendon and back up. Knees stay slightly flexed the whole time. while the hips are flexing as the weight is lowered. Now, for the up phase, the hips will then be extended, but we still want to keep our knees slightly bent or slightly flexed here. This is yet another lift where we want to keep our abs tight or our core tight, so we want to tighten up here. Is the first coaching cue that comes to mind. Obviously, we want to be an athlete here throughout any lift. We want to keep a good chest position, good back position, a neutral back, and our chest out. We want to keep that good posture throughout the lift. The last coaching cue I would like to use would be to explode. I feel like it's always a great job to lower the weight here and control it throughout the lift. But at the same time, we should be popping up or exploding up. Coaching cue here that I would use would be pop up or explode, either one, to tell the lifter or the athlete that we want them to fire through the lift here at the end. Moving on, we will cover the leg extension machine or the knee extension machine. We have the exerciser seated here, ready to begin the repetitions with his back firmly against the back pad and his feet even with each other behind the leg pad here. The first phase, of course, will be the up phase or the concentric phase, in which the knees will extend, as the name implies for the machine. Muscles used in this would be the quad muscles that include the rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis, intermedius, and vastus medialis. For this up phase, we want the lifter to stay seated in this position, erect against the back pad. We will then see the knees extend and lift the leg pad up. We want to see the lifter do a great job of getting the legs straight and parallel with each other. Knees, hips, or excuse me, knees, thighs, and feet. On the up phase, the lifter also does a great job of firing through the repetition on the concentric phase while slowly lowering the weight eccentrically. Of course, even though we are using a machine, we still want to have some of the same principles. While the lifter is sitting here with his back against the back pad, we still want to have good posture, right? Be an athlete. Doesn't matter what you're on, you still got to be one. We also want to explode through the concentric phase here if we want to gain any kind of power. We also want to keep our abs tight or to tighten up here. And lastly, one that I love to use while using machines, because you are so stable here, is to mind your movers and to really think about firing the quads as we extend our knees. Next, we'll get into some lunges here, specifically dumbbell forward lunges. The muscles that we will be working with will be our quads, our hamstrings, and our glutes, specifically our gluteus maximus, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, vastus medialis, rectus femoris, and our iliopsoas. We'll get into the forward or down phase here, specifically with our right leg to start off with our exerciser. Now after that first one, we want to think about really getting an exaggerated first front step, which the exerciser does well here. Some of the incorrect things that may happen will be the knee over the foot. Now it is kind of hard to see from the side view, but we kind of see that forward angle on the lower leg, which kind of signifies that maybe that knee is getting over the foot too much. Maybe we want to flex those hips a little more, drop that trailing leg a little bit more. And of course, we want to keep our torso erect and perpendicular with the floor as we're going through this down phase, excuse me. We also want to make sure that we're firing off and getting out of that lunge and really pushing the floor down here. So all the way through this lift, we really want to control our weight forward with our exaggerated step here, control ourselves on the way down, and fire back up. Get some good knee flexion, hip flexion, and then extension on the way back up, of course. Some of these common sources of error are some of the things that I did include already. We have our knee going over our foot here. Maybe our back isn't as erect or perpendicular with the floor as we'd really like. And maybe we're not getting that trail knee as far down as we'd like. Some definite coaching cues for this lift would be to tighten up here, keep that core tight. Be an athlete, we want to have good posture throughout the lift. As we switch legs here, we see the athlete does a much better job of keeping that knee behind the foot like we talked about, but we still want to keep that torso erect. So we want to be an athlete, have good posture, keep the core tight with tighten up, and maybe even include, exploding or firing off, because we do want to get back out of this down phase in a powerful manner. Now we'll get into some abdominal stuff here, starting off with abdominal crunches. We have the exerciser lying on the ground with their back evenly on the ground. We have our thighs vertical and our knees bent. We also see that we have our feet crossed over or our lower legs crossed over. Of course, this could be personal preference for the abdominal crunch, and of course, other variations of the abdominal crunch could be done with our feet uncrossed. We also have our hands supporting our head and neck behind and interlocked with our fingers. We'll begin with the concentric phase or the up phase, where the exerciser will bring his torso towards his legs and then eccentrically lowering back down to the starting or neutral position, and repeated for repetitions. Exerciser does a great job of getting the shoulder blades off of the ground in a powerful manner here. Muscle worked here would be the rectus abdominis and maybe a little bit of the external oblique, but the main muscle we're getting here is the rectus abdominis here. Some common sources of error within this lift would possibly be maybe not getting the shoulder blades quite off the ground, maybe having our hands crossed over our chest instead of behind our head, and maybe not firing off enough through the exercise. Some coaching cues for the abdominal crunch could include a mind your mover coaching cue, and a mind your mover would be to really think about your abdomen or your abs really flexing when you're getting raised up here into the upper concentric phase. Also, not to forget that the down phase is important as well, and not just to fall back into the starting position, but to lower yourself back into the starting position. Continuing on, we'll get into a sit-up, so another form of a crunch. Working the abdomen here. Starting position, we want the exerciser lying on the back, knees bent. Next, we'll get into sit-ups for the abdomen. Starting position for the sit-ups would be having the exerciser with their back flat on the ground, knees bent, feet flat on the ground, and what this exerciser does not do, which is putting your hands behind your head with your fingers interlocked. We're going to have the up phase, which brings the exerciser all the way up and not just the shoulder blades off the ground, working the rectus abdominis, and then controlling themselves on the way down for the eccentric phase. Some coaching cues for this lift could be to explode. We don't want to just work through the motions on this lift. We also want to mind our movers here. Really think about our abs contracting as we're picking ourselves up off the ground, as well as controlling ourselves. And lastly, for the abs, we have the crunch machine. This again, wouldn't you know, it would be working the rectus abdominis muscles. We want to sit in the machine with good posture here with our feet flat on the ground. We also see we have the exerciser with his arms crossed over here holding the handles. And we'll begin the down phase by pushing the pad down and crunching. And then controlling that pad on the way up and controlling back into the starting position with every rep. The exerciser does a good job controlling each rep here. Even though we're in a machine here, it doesn't quite have a back on it. So we want to remind them to be an athlete and to have good posture here. Really get that full range of motion through the whole exercise. Of course, the machine does a lot of the stabilizing for us, so we really want to focus on minding our mover here, or focusing on contracting the abs and really getting everything out of the machine that we can, because it does do a lot of the stabilizing for us.